About 2 o'clock. No, we're right on time, man. Oh, I told them that we were here.
We're here. We arrived.
There is another thing. What do you guys think?
Good afternoon, guys. My name's Nathan. I am the lab tech here. I'll be graduating next month. Wow, that passed by fast year. From Harriet-Watt University online and the Master Brewers program. And as I said, this is our water treatment, water holding facility. You guys, a lot of you probably filter your own water at home, your kitchen. That big green carbon fiber is our high quality water filter. We get the water from 2 sources here in Springfield, downtown Springfield, mostly from the Blackwater treatment facility. And from there we can get it up from 5 to 10 different sources of water. So it's a big cocktail of water, mostly groundwater, but it can come from above ground water sources during high rain seasons. And so water chemistry becomes particularly important.
Jake, what is this right here? What am I?
Holy mole.
And what's in it?
It's got pepper, 4 different kinds of peppers, and on cinnamon.
This is our malt storage room. We're going to actually head up the stairs and come in. You guys also can staple some malt too. Woo. This is American two-row malted, and this is looks like malted unmilled American wheat, and then we've got some roasted milled malt right here. The malt room, the malt storehouse. This was originally the grain and sugar silo storage facility for the Wholesome Bread Company. That's actually their sugar tank right there.
Let's start talking.
It is pretty much worthless. It costs more to disassemble and take it out than it was just to leave it. And so there it sits. It's called a Milton. They use a 4-pin roller mill. Basically there are 4 stainless steel pins that just crack the grain. They don't crush it or destroy it in any way. They just crack it to expose the embryo that's inside. And that's what's going to provide all the power to turn all the starches in the grain to sugar. And it's still very much alive too at this point. So it's milled here, and it goes up on these chain discs out to the brew house. So if you guys want to follow me, we'll head out to the brew house. We'll talk a little bit more there. This is just a special storage, or this is a special hopper. When we first started at Mother's, we didn't have any of this nice technology. So we're actually dumping these 55-pound grain bags in by hand, even for the 2-row barley. So you can imagine 1,600 pounds of grain, all loaded. Was me, all loaded by hand, dropped into there, and then this was attached directly to the brew house. But the rest of the grain you see here is specialty malts, and they're from either Canada, the UK, or we have some from Chile. You guys have heard of grind, they use specialty malt from Chile. Not very creative as they are in other sciences with naming, as they are in the brewing industry. So we just call it alpha and beta. And the alpha enzyme is responsible for the bittering action of hops, and the beta is responsible for the aroma. Bittering is pretty self-explanatory. It's very bitter. But the beta can have lots of flavors. It can either be floral, or spicy, or citrus. And then those all break down to a different type for each one, such as you can have citra hops, which have an orange citrus-like smell to them, or a lemon citrus smell, or you can have a grapefruit kind of zest to them as well. So they go all over. Hops are also closely related to cannabis. Actually, the alpha and beta acids are very similar to the active ingredient in cannabis. And if you guys want, if you guys go out to the yard after the tour, we do have some hop plants growing in the far corner. You're more than welcome to go out and take a peek at them.
This is the Mother's Hop Plant Garden.
That guy?
How does it smell?
Yeah, it smells citrusy, Sam. These must be Cascade hops.
It's Cascade hops.
And yes, they do look like growing cannabis.
Now, how do you discern hops from cannabis?
The way you use them.
I think you just smoke it first.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're at the kettle. As we turn the liquid that's filled with now sugar water, I forgot to mention the starch to sugar conversion takes place here in the master water tun. And that's when the acidic water from the water room comes into contact with the still living grain, and then that actually the grain starts activating certain enzymes to convert the starch to sugar. Because we're sending a signal to it that it's time to grow. So if you guys homebrew at all, or you start homebrewing, you might recognize this as Sadler Brew Magic. Dogfish Head CEO Sam, he brewed exclusively on this system for his brewery for about a year, up to 3 brews a day. Brewing on this system takes about 6 hours per batch, so he was brewing about 18, 19 hours a day every day of the week to build his business. Here at Mother's, it's our research and development brewery. So while it doesn't replicate the industrial process quite as well, if we're wanting to see how something will taste, this is perfect for it. All right, so after the whirlpool, we need to cool the beer down as fast as possible. 1, to prevent any bad off layers from forming, and 2, to prevent contamination from bacteria. Because we do have basically sugar water, and so it's open to a wide variety of organisms to spoil, so to speak. And so we have our heat exchanger here. That's where that propylene glycol and that cold water I mentioned earlier. This is a 3-phase heat exchanger. So the propylene glycol cools the beer, and then the cold water keeps the propylene glycol cool. And so that way we're not having to spend a lot of energy recirculating, recooling propylene glycol. And this is the cellar area here at Mother's. Let's see, these are 60-barrel fermenters, so it takes 2 batches in the brew house to fill these up to capacity. They are double jacketed, which means they have 2 cooling zones. They have a top and a bottom, so if we were going to do just a single 30-barrel batch, we don't have to waste the energy cooling the empty half of the vessel. And they are cone-shaped. Yeast like to, when they collide in suspension, they like to kind of hug each other biochemically, and then they get heavier, more dense, and so they sink lower and lower. The cone shape facilitates that more often because at the end of the brewing process, we're going to harvest or crop the yeast and use it for another brew. And so we cool the beer down, that facilitates that hugging action more, and then we're able to recycle the yeast up to 7 times. And yeast is actually quite expensive because it has to be a sterile operation, it has to be shipped cold and within 12 hours. I mentioned the R&D system. That's about a half barrel. And if we want to replicate something in the industrial process, we have 7-barrel fermenters. If you guys want to come over here. These are 7-barrel fermenters. And we use them as our yeast prop. So to save money, we order 7 barrels worth of yeast and then allow them to ferment here to bring them up to a more 30-barrel batch. Yeah, so as the fermentation takes place, CEO Jeff Strog likes to say they eat sugar and fart CO2 and belch alcohol. Simplicity, yeah, that's basically what's going on here. So this is a sterile airlock. It allows the CO2 gases to come out. There's also other gases such as DMS, which is a sulfur-containing compound. So that's why you may get a smell of rotten eggs over here in the cellar. That's perfectly natural. Doesn't mean it's bad or anything, it just means the yeast are doing a good job. 2 different broad species of yeast. There's L yeast, and then there's a lager yeast. L yeast ferment at the top, and lager yeast ferment at the bottom of the vessel. Lagering fermentations take up to 30 days, at the very least. Sorry, and so they need to be stored separately, otherwise they would take up so much room, just making lagers. Traditionally in America, everyone thinks Budweiser is the king of beers, that everyone drinks lagers. That's not the case. The American craft brewing movement, up until this year, has been dominated by ales. And so these are all ale fermentation tanks. Lager fermentations take place the first 2 weeks here as well. And then after week 2, we put them in the lagering tanks for up to 20 days. Oktoberfest and Uber Pills are only 2 real lagers. Barley wine, or Foggy Notion, we put in the lagering tanks because that was a very long aging, fermentation. But this tank here, its whole purpose is to facilitate Oktoberfest. That's because we were making Foggy Notion at the same time we were making Oktoberfest. The only beers we have unfiltered here are traditionally the research and development types, such as Holy Mole. We also have Sandy Wheat, it's unfiltered, but this is our Diatomaceous Earth filter. This thing sits vertically. It's filled with tiny pores. Diatomaceous Earth is basically ground up crustaceans. And so they are negatively charged and they bind to all the positively charged proteins and yeast. And that makes them bigger and allows us to filter them out here. We can filter about 60 barrels in 2 hours. So it's a very fast process. And then the result then is rye beer. So filtered beer that then goes on to be packaged is just termed rye beer. Right. And the beer travels along these insulated pipes over to the packaging area. And then we'll learn how we keg. As well as bottle. Yeah, these are all clean kegs that are going to be packaged within the next week. So we just got these on Friday, they'll be gone by Tuesday. So now we're going to move on to a tasting. So we're going to try our 3 year rounders and then our summer season.
In beer tasting, you traditionally start from lightest to darkest.
So Tone is traditionally the name for a blonde baby. Actually, if you look on the box cover or the tap handles, that's actually a picture of the brewmaster's son. He is a little blonde-headed child. He's a crazy one at that. He's about 4 years old. And when you're sampling beer, just like wine, you want to swirl the glass, get the CO2 to release the aroma. Take a smell, and one of the first smells you'll pick up on Towhead is more of a citrusy. That comes from a little bit from the Kolsch juice, but mostly from the hop selection. And you just want to take a drink. All right, guys. The next beer coming up is 3 Blind Mice. This is a fabulous place.
Yeah, it is pretty good.
It's an Irish red, a German alt, and a English brown. So the obvious thing is the color. The color obviously comes from the English brown. Also, you guys swirl and take a smell. You'll get some nutty or maybe a roasted aroma. That's also from the English brown.
Thank you, sir.
So where are you guys from?
St. Springfield.
The British businessman was like, I can just make the beer there in India.
Okay.
And they didn't have it wasn't industrialized. And so he was using a lot of unsanitary techniques. And so to prevent the beer from going sour, they just had to use a lot of hops. The Pilsen River had 200 breweries just within 10 miles of each other. It has a very heavy hop bitterness and a heavy hop aroma compared to the malt valleys. It is our summer seasonal. It's actually one of the top 50 best summer seasonals in the American craft brewing industry right now.
What do we think of the tour, guys?
He claimed that most of the water came from groundwater. The water that they get from Blackman treatment plant comes from groundwater sources, and Blackman treatment plant comes. Its source water is James River, the James River, down on off Blackman Road. They also pulled from McDaniel Lake and Fellows Lake.
Did you feel like the tour was
The
accurate?
tour was great.
It was accurate, but
It was
just
very
he
accurate.
was a little bit mistaken maybe on this water source.
That was the one little miss. That was the one thing I knew something about. Okay.
What'd you think of the tour?
More beer, more simplified answers.
What'd you think of the tour, JR?
It's awesome. Another sign of American progress.
And Chris.
Really?